The situation in Gaza has become increasingly dire, a landscape scarred by conflict and human suffering. In late May 2025, the skies over the Gaza Strip were once again filled with the terrifying sounds of conflict. Israeli airstrikes, part of an offensive dubbed Operation Gideon's Chariots, pounded multiple areas across the densely populated enclave on Sunday, May 25th and continued into Monday, May 26th. The Gaza Health Ministry reported a devastating toll. At least 41 people were killed in overnight strikes alone, with over 90 individuals sustaining injuries. These numbers paint a grim picture of the escalating violence that continues to grip the region, leaving civilians caught in the crossfire with nowhere safe to turn, their lives hanging precariously in the balance each day. The targets of these recent military actions included a residential building in Deir al-Balah, which was reduced to rubble, and tragically, a school that had been converted into a shelter for displaced families. According to The Guardian, one such strike on a school-turned-shelter claimed the lives of at least 31 people, a figure that shockingly included children and left more than 55 others wounded. Faris Afana, an ambulance driver on the scene, described a horrific aftermath, reporting a minimum of 30 fatalities at this single location. He spoke of many more individuals suffering from severe burns, his voice heavy with the knowledge that the death toll was tragically expected to climb higher as rescue efforts continued amidst the chaos and destruction. The human cost of this protracted conflict is staggering. The World Food Programme has issued stark warnings, stating that parts of Gaza are teetering on the brink of famine-like conditions. Over 1.7 million Gazans, an overwhelming majority of the population, are estimated to be in urgent need of basic necessities such as food and medical supplies. This isn't a distant problem, it's an immediate crisis unfolding before our eyes. The essential elements for survival are becoming increasingly scarce, pushing an already vulnerable population further into despair. The international community watches, but for those on the ground, watching isn't enough. Action is desperately needed to avert a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. The desperation for aid is palpable. Malnutrition is reportedly spreading at an alarming rate, with the most vulnerable, particularly children, succumbing to starvation. Dozens of young lives have already been lost to this silent killer, according to reports from The Guardian. This crisis is compounded by the fact that many aid convoys laden with life-saving supplies remain stalled at border crossings, unable to reach those in desperate need. Local warehouses, once stocked with provisions, are now running dangerously low or are entirely empty. The urgency cannot be overstated. Aid is not just important, it is the very lifeline for millions whose survival depends on the swift and unimpeded delivery of assistance in this besieged territory. Amidst this deepening crisis, a new initiative emerged with the stated goal of alleviating the suffering. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, a private aid organization, announced the launch of its first food distribution phase across northern and central Gaza on May 26, 2025. This new player on the humanitarian stage is notably backed by a bilateral agreement between the United States and Israel. The GHF, which established its base in Geneva in February 2025, has set ambitious targets for itself, aiming to make a significant impact on the critical food shortages plaguing the Palestinian territory. The world watches to see if this new approach can navigate the treacherous landscape of aid delivery in such a complex environment. The GHF's mission, as articulated by the organization, is to distribute an astounding 300 million meals within Gaza over a remarkably short 90-day period. In its initial operational phase, the foundation reported that it had successfully distributed over 100 metric tons of food across several zones identified as having the highest levels of need. This first step, while a fraction of the overall goal, was presented as a sign of intent and capability. The focus appears to be on rapid deployment and large-scale delivery, attempting to fill a void that has grown increasingly wide as the conflict has dragged on, pushing more and more people towards the precipice of starvation and severe deprivation. However, the very structure and backing of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation differentiated significantly from traditional aid channels. The initiative was reportedly created, at least in part, to bypass established organizations like the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA. Israel has long accused UNRWA of having links to Hamas, allegations that UNRWA vehemently denies. This decision to circumvent existing experienced aid mechanisms has immediately raised questions and concerns within the broader humanitarian community, signaling a potential shift in how aid might be coordinated and delivered in highly politicized conflict zones, potentially setting a controversial precedent for future operations elsewhere. The political dimensions of GHF's emergence are undeniable. The United States State Department has publicly expressed its support for GHF's aid delivery plans, lending significant international weight to the new foundation. This backing, while potentially opening doors and facilitating access in some regards, also intertwines the humanitarian mission with geopolitical strategies. The initial hope, presumably, was that this streamlined state-backed approach could cut through red tape and deliver aid more efficiently. Yet, the Foundation's close alignment with specific state actors has from the outset cast a shadow over its perceived neutrality, a cornerstone principle for most humanitarian work, especially in such a polarized and sensitive context as Gaza. Despite its ambitious goals and high-level backing, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation quickly found itself embroiled in significant controversy, marked by a series of high-profile resignations that shook confidence in the fledgling organization. One of the most prominent departures was that of Jake Wood, who stepped down from his role as GHF's executive director. Wood stated unequivocally that the operation as it was structured could not fulfill its critical mission while genuinely adhering to fundamental humanitarian principles. He cited the impossibility of implementing the aid plan without compromising core values such as humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and operational independence, a damning assessment from the person tasked with leading the initiative. The resignations did not stop with the executive director, signaling deeper systemic issues within the GHF. Soon after Wood's departure, a senior logistics coordinator also tendered their resignation. This individual cited deep concerns over transparency, political pressure, and safety risks on the ground as primary reasons for leaving the organization. These concerns point to severe operational and ethical challenges. Furthermore, Dr. Leila Hamdan, a humanitarian policy advisor for GHF, had already resigned the previous week. Dr. Hamdan described GHF's operational model as politically compromised and operationally unsustainable, adding another critical voice to the growing chorus of internal dissent and concern over the Foundation's viability and integrity. These internal upheavals were mirrored by external criticism. Critics argue that the emergence of GHF, rather than simplifying aid delivery, has actually undermined established aid mechanisms that have decades of experience in the region. Questions surrounding GHF's neutrality became widespread, particularly given its direct backing by parties involved in the conflict. This has, according to many observers, complicated coordination efforts among the various aid agencies attempting to operate in an already chaotic environment. Reinforcing this, the United Nations officially rejected the GHF plan, criticizing it as insufficient and detrimental to the established broader aid efforts, further isolating the new foundation from the experienced humanitarian community. The response from Palestinian factions was also sharply critical. Hamas, the governing authority in Gaza, outrightly condemned the new GHF system. They claimed that the initiative effectively weaponizes food aid and serves as a tool to enforce starvation rather than alleviate it. This accusation, whether accurate or not, highlights the deep mistrust and political complexities surrounding any aid effort in Gaza. Compounding these issues, traditional and well-respected aid agencies have largely declined to cooperate with GHF. They cited serious concerns that GHF's model violates fundamental humanitarian principles and potentially international law, leaving the new foundation struggling for legitimacy and partners on the ground. Despite the launch of new initiatives like the GHF, the overarching humanitarian situation in Gaza continues its downward spiral, a grim testament to the scale of the crisis. The promised relief has yet to materialize in any meaningful way for the vast majority of those in need. Reports persist of aid convoys, packed with essential supplies, remaining stalled at border crossings, entangled in bureaucratic delays and security restrictions. Warehouses within Gaza that should be distribution hubs are either running critically low or are completely bare. The figure of over 1.7 million people in urgent need of food and medical supplies is not just a statistic. It represents individual lives hanging in the balance, each day a struggle for basic survival. The relentless cycle of violence directly and severely impedes any attempt to deliver aid effectively and safely. the Israeli military has vowed to seize control of the entire Gaza Strip and has stated its intention to continue fighting until Hamas is either destroyed or disarmed. Ongoing military operations, such as Operation Gideon's Chariots, create an environment where movement is perilous, infrastructure is frequently damaged or destroyed, and aid workers themselves face immense risks. It is an almost impossible task to establish reliable supply lines and distribution networks when the landscape is an active war zone, with civilian areas repeatedly becoming battlegrounds, making every delivery a life-threatening endeavor for all involved. Against this backdrop of escalating conflict and deepening humanitarian distress, international calls for a ceasefire and restraint have intensified, though with little tangible effect on the ground thus far. Adding another layer to the complex geopolitical situation, President Donald Trump, who was on a Middle East diplomatic tour, announced on Sunday, May 26, 2025, that he would be pushing for a 30-day ceasefire in both Gaza and Ukraine. He planned to engage in phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky later in the week. While such diplomatic overtures offer a glimmer of hope, the path to a lasting peace, or even a sustained pause in hostilities, remains fraught with immense challenges and deeply entrenched obstacles. Ultimately, the situation in Gaza underscores the profound difficulties faced by aid groups operating in active conflict zones. Ensuring the safety of personnel and aid recipients is a paramount, yet incredibly challenging concern. Gaining consistent and unimpeded access to vulnerable populations is often at the mercy of political and military decisions. Navigating intense political pressures from all sides while striving to maintain neutrality and independence is a constant balancing act. The sheer scale of human need frequently overwhelms the available resources and logistical capacities. For Gaza, the future of aid delivery remains precarious, dependent on a cessation of hostilities and a genuine commitment from all parties to prioritize human life above all else.